In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. We get our readings for the Ascension of the Lord from Acts of the Apostles, chapter 1, verses 1 to 11, from the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians, chapter 1, verses 17 to 23, and the Gospel is from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 28, verses 16 to 20. My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, during the Last Supper, Jesus assures his disciples that he will prepare for them a place in the Father's house. This place in the Father's house is made possible for humanity by the ascension of Christ into heaven. Human beings have thereby been elevated to a divine dignity, the dignity of participating in the Father's presence. Each one of us is assured of this place in the Father's house. The ascension of Jesus is the beginning of our salvation. Where Jesus has gone, we hope to follow. If the ascension is about a real human being with the Father in heaven, then it also reminds that in Jesus, God was present with us here on this earth. The ascension marks the last appearance of Christ among us. It reminds us that he walked with us all the way. The Feast of Ascension provides a reassurance that human beings really can be one with the Father in heaven and that God really is here with us. The Ascension certainly seems to have reassured the apostles. Afterwards, they went out to the whole world and preached everywhere, confident that the Lord was still with them, despite his physical departure. Jesus promised the apostles and us that he would be with us always, and that he would send the Holy Spirit to witness to the truth. This exalted vocation that we have received of the divine dignity, which God intends for us, differs so strikingly from the perception that humanity so often has of itself. How frequently in the history of humanity and human relationships have men and women found themselves trampled upon, degraded, and even discarded as of no consequence. God holds out a nobler future for humanity. It is a future which humanity itself cannot bring about. It can only come as a free gift from God. At the same time, the dignity that the ascension of Christ confers on human nature calls for a response on our part, personally. It furnishes us with a vision with which to shape our world and gives us the foundation for our responsibilities to each other. In his final appearance to the 11 disciples before his ascension into heaven, Jesus, from the height of the mountain in Galilee, gives a panoramic view of God's plan for the world. According to St. Matthew's account, Jesus emphasizes three aspects of this plan. He confirms that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him. On the basis of this authority, he commissions the disciples to make disciples of all nations. And lastly, he assures them that he will be present to them until the end of time. Seated at the right hand of the Father, Jesus continues this mission of drawing humanity away from the spiral of death and corruption to a place of life and happiness within the heart of God. Yet now, Christ gives his disciples the responsibility of being the means by which he is to extend his project of leading humanity to the Father. The commission of the disciples is to go out to the nations, baptizing all peoples in order that they might die to their old ways and come to share the new life with God. And they are to teach the nations to observe the commands of Christ, so that men and women might live in a way that reflects the God-given dignity. This mission to the nations derives its authority from the risen Christ on the account of the universal sovereignty that he now has over both heaven and the whole earth. In the task of bringing God's truth about humanity to the whole world, Jesus promises his disciples his continuing presence in their midst. He tells them, "Know that I am with you always to the end of time." Jesus is Emmanuel, a God with us. And this remains true as much after his ascension as before. Certainly, his physical presence among the disciples will cease. This was limited to the period of his earthly life. But the spiritual presence of the risen Christ knows no such limitation. The ascended Christ is no longer restricted to a particular place in the world, but is now accessible and close to all in the way that only God can be close to all. Now, before the throne of God, the risen Lord continues to guide and to intercede for those who will go out into the world to bring his word to the people, to bring together and to heal the scattered and bruised pieces of humanity until the time when God's kingdom will definitely be established and creation will be brought together in the unity of the Father's house, where we will once again be in the presence of God as Jesus has promised us. Let the Feast of Ascension inspire each one of us to take up this great task, to live out the great commission that God, Jesus, has given us, that we be faithful to our baptismal promises, we be faithful to the mission that Jesus has entrusted to us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.